Ladies and gentlemen, this is Steve Eyes. You're on the Eyes is Watching channel. Well, people, another conspiracy theory turns out to be true, and it's safe to say we need new conspiracy theories because literally every single one has come true. Okay, and I do mean every single one. Every single time. Gather around, fellow goyim cattle. We got a lot to dive deep into here. It's been a crazy week. Here's a question. Can anyone tell me why the desperation here to crack down on anti-Semitism leading up to this Epstein file release? ADL head Jonathan Greenblatt says that any Americans who criticize Jews in Israel will be monitored by the FBI. We will monitor social media and check your bank accounts. He says, I have 40 analysts working 24 hours, 7 days a week. Well, that's a funny way to convince the public your people don't hold any power. Just last show, I was going over how Netanyahu is going extra hard on anti-Semitism online, in quotes, saying it's most prevalent in social media. This is the new battlefield, he says. And this is where we must counter with our own weapons. We're late in the game, but we will win this battle too, as we won on the battlefield. Isn't it kind of funny how only a few days after Netanyahu and ADL's Jonathan Greenblatt said that, the Epstein files drop? Like, damn. Now we know why they were going so hard trying to shut down any criticism here. They call it anti-Semitism for any criticism of Jews in Israel leading up to the Epstein file release. I mean, come on. In one of the Epstein emails, he emails himself, and that's not far-fetched or unusual. I mean, it shows up in intelligence work where email accounts function as shared spaces, okay, rather than private inboxes. So it makes sense. A lot of these emails, it's Epstein sending emails to himself. So he's basically creating time-stamped records that his handlers or other authorized people can already see, turning self-emails into quiet internal notes. That's what a lot of this looks like. And what matters is what Epstein chose to preserve, because this is what he wrote word for word here. At my dinner table, I asked, why are you right-wing guys so anti-Semitic? One said, historically, we all know it's actually been the Jews behind the governments actually pulling the strings. I said, like who? And one pointed at me, and they all started to roar with laughter. He said, me? And one guy said, how do you explain in only 3 days there have been princes, prime ministers, and other ministers, plus 2 presidents of world bodies? He says, guilty. He said, so funny, wish you were here. Epstein describes a moment where people openly claim Jews run governments. The accusation gets directed at him. Then the table breaks out in laughter and he writes it down. I mean, this is absurd. He repeats the exchange and then emphasizes the laughter and highlights how quickly princes, prime ministers, emissaries, all of these global bodies passing through his orbit within days. And he even says he's guilty as part of the story, then saving it, and that choice reveals how comfortable he was with the implication and with being associated with access and influence at that level. And that fits with the other email where Epstein and his associate talk about Jewish souls being different from non-Jewish souls. Think about that, structured differently, made up of different components, operating on different levels. Okay, language rooted in mystical hierarchy, thinking and spiritual elitism. He sees himself as superior, okay? He's Jewish and we're all goyims. Goyim is repeated through all of these emails. I mean, they literally refer to us as goyims. It's like the N-word for everybody that's not a Jew. The same fixation Epstein showed for years around intelligence hierarchies, genetic hierarchies, social rank, and access to power, and taken together these emails, it shows a worldview built around layers of humanity and self-placement near the top. So these people do believe they're at the top genetically, a mindset that feeds their confidence. In one email, Mark Fisher wrote an email to Jeffrey Epstein in March 2010 about how Jewish souls are composed of different ingredients, components, and have different higher levels than a non-Jewish soul, which helps explain how Epstein moved through all of these top spaces for decades with protection and immunity, and why the self-email matters because, it preserves that mentality in his own words as a record he intentionally kept. The deeper you dig into the Epstein material, the more it starts looking like a closely intertwined network stitched together with money, science, power, and deeply, deeply dark stuff. Okay, these are the same people who were very serious about biology and control long before COVID ever showed up, because suddenly Epstein shows up around politicians and royalty alongside DARPA-linked figures, Bill Gates adjacent science advisors, Google executives who came straight out of the defense world, World Economic Forum types, Israeli defense leadership, NIH-connected researchers, and China all floating around the same conversations here, the same dinners, the same emails, with names like Regina Dugan popping up back when she slid from running DARPA directly into a senior Google role. Epstein was talking to his friends about this World Economic Forum speaker, saying how great she was and condoning everything she said. And this is someone that went from working with DARPA to a role at Google, something even the tech insiders and press called really mysterious at the time. For those that don't know who this is, Regina Dugan had presentations on behalf of DARPA bragging about tech like this: a microchip pill for authentication. Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla was excited to hear about this too. He said, imagine the compliance they can achieve. This is who Epstein was talking about in the emails and giving praise to.
So I take a vitamin every morning. What if I could take vitamin authentication?
What?
Vitamin authentication. Look, I have one right here. Well, here, I'll let you hold it. Would you like to hold it?
I'll hold it.
Okay. So this,
You guys see it?
this pill has a small chip inside of it with a switch. It also has what amounts to an inside-out potato battery. When
Really
you
small.
swallow it, the acids in your stomach serve as the electrolyte.
That's what they do.
And they power it up, and the switch goes on and off. And it creates an 18-bit ECG-like signal in your body, and essentially your entire body becomes your authentication token. Yes, this is true. Okay?
Okay, but
Okay, so wait. So it's really true. So what this means is that becomes my first superpower. I really want this superpower. It means that my arms are like wires, my hands are like alligator clips. When I touch my phone, my computer, my door, my car, I'm authenticated in. First superpower. Like, I want that.
So we're not shipping that right away.
Yeah, no. We're not shipping that right away. But it
but
sounds like...
this is FDA cleared?
So here's the thing. This is not science fiction. This pill was actually made by a company called Proteus, and they've developed it for medical applications. That pill has been CE stamped and cleared by the FDA. You can take 30 of those per day for the rest of your life.
And then what happens? Does your heart
Nothing.
beat change? Does your...
We can just tell that
you-
you've taken the pill. A tattoo that could be used for authentication.
Electronic pill, if I can call it like that. So it is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance.
Wow, this is wild. Something Bill Gates has been talking about for years. And now, he's popping up in these Epstein files to no one's surprise. Now, Epstein's own staff, Leslie Groff and even Boris Nikolic, were forwarding emails around like this like it was just normal office stuff. And Nikolic just so happens to be the same guy advising Bill Gates, sitting in biotech venture capital, and he's connected to the WEF circles. Then you get to that 2017 email where Epstein is directly emailing Gates about his work at BGC3. And the deliverables listed are insane. Domestic health projects, stuff about neurotech, brain science, securing personal health data through advanced digital systems, and even white papers about neurotechnology being used as weapons for intelligence and defense. And then buried in there, like it's nothing, it says follow-up recommendations and or technical specifications for strain pandemic simulation. March 3, 2017. So what the hell, Bill Gates talking to Epstein about pandemic simulations 3 years before COVID? I mean, this is years before anyone was told to mask up, stay inside, or take any injections. Gets even weirder because Epstein has already been casually talking about genetic modification for years. Like that 2015 email where he's talking about bioengineering pigs to make kosher bacon. So this wasn't a new thought for him. This was something that he was discussing for years, and he seemed pretty obsessed with transhumanism and bioengineering humans and animals. Then Epstein starts name dropping stuff like he has the Israeli defense minister with him and saying he's super informed and wondering if DARPA might want to meet. Yeah, super informed does a lot of work there, because Ehud Barak didn't just randomly end up hanging out with Epstein, okay? That's not an accident. Clearly, Epstein was a Mossad agent. And this is why I say that, because this document has been going around lately, and this is an actual FBI form. It's called an FD 1023. That's what the FBI uses when they write down information from a confidential human source. Basically an informant. So this is an actual FBI document. They were writing down what someone told them about Epstein. And in this report, the source is claiming Epstein was close to Ehud Barak, former prime minister of Israel, and that Barak was trained as a spy. And then the source says they believed Epstein was basically a co-opted Mossad asset. So the FBI even knew about this and stayed silent. So when you see former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, showing up to Epstein's apartment repeatedly, flying around with him, visiting his homes, and being photographed together almost every day, people act like it's some random billionaire friendship. No, this is a lot more deep, okay? It's not random. Then you see Jeffrey Ling, another one of Epstein's associates, showing up in the background in many of these emails as well. The former Army colonel and neurologist who founded DARPA's Biological Technologies Office. The same office focused on turning biology into national security tech. And suddenly you're seeing emails talking about weird plant-to-human experiments where even the people involved admit it sounds unethical or illegal, but profitable. And that fits perfectly with what happened during COVID, where the same tech platforms with DARPA roots, DARPA basically invented some of these platforms. That's why they spent years censoring anyone who questioned anything about COVID or vaccine safety. Meanwhile, Epstein's files are full of eugenics talks, cloning talks, genetic hierarchy talks. Population biology talk, even China getting mentioned. And then fast forward, and you've got NIH-linked studies suggesting COVID didn't hit all populations the same way, which RFK Jr. even brought up publicly. Think about that. Epstein discussing with Bill Gates a pandemic simulation, biological hierarchy, talking about specific strains that harm certain DNAs more. I don't think they're talking about the fake virus BS. I think they're talking about a shot that harms certain people more. And they were discussing this years before COVID. And then when you zoom out, it's obvious who benefited from all this. Big pharma companies pulled something like $90 billion in vaccine profits in just those 2 years. And buried in the Epstein dump as well is an email trail connecting him to 23andMe, a DNA harvesting company that collected genetic material from millions of people and then conveniently collapses into bankruptcy just recently. When you remember how deep Epstein's long obsession is with genetics, reproduction, vaccines, pandemic simulations, selective breeding, the whole picture gets really dark here. He was paying for genome sequencing, stem cell work, permanent DNA storage, and he openly talked about impregnating dozens of women at his New Mexico ranch to spread his DNA into the future. Think about how crazy that is. All while hosting elite scientists and AI people at private dinners like this was normal dinner conversation. Epstein was treating human biology like something that could be collected, cataloged, and redesigned, repurposed. Funding transhumanist projects and somehow convincing people at the highest levels of science and medicine to take his money and fund bizarre bioengineering transhumanist experiments. That's where the timeline stops making sense. Now, what makes all of this even more sinister is the possibility that Epstein is still alive, slipped out the back of that jail in 2019 and kept working quietly behind the scenes. Because after his alleged death, just a few months later, Event 201 happens, a pandemic simulation Then the simulation plays out in real time just a few months after. A pandemic that scared people into lining up for a vaccine that Bill Gates and Epstein were already discussing in emails. So the question is dark and simple. Did Epstein succeed in his plan to inject the entire world with his DNA? I know that sounds scary but it gotta be asked. Because if everyone believes he's dead, no one ever thinks to blame him. And the reason that question won't go away is because of what happened around his death itself. I did go over this in a previous show, but it needs to be brought up again. An hour before Epstein's death was even announced, a series of posts appeared online from someone claiming to be an MCC prison guard, describing a body swap, a van arriving that never properly checked into the facility, and multiple prison protocols being ignored. This was a 4chan post hours before any MSM outlet got this story. And at the time, it was, sounded insane and got written off immediately. But from the recent Epstein file drop, we now know the FBI actually investigated the person behind these posts hard. And bank records tied to the subpoenas confirmed the poster was a real MCC prison guard named Roberto Grijalva. Then you start stacking the other anomalies together. Epstein's cell was never preserved as a proper crime scene. His body was removed before FBI agents arrived. No photos were taken of the body in the cell. Items inside the cell were moved and disturbed during the initial investigation, which never would normally happen at a crime scene. I mean, this crime scene was looking like Charlie Kirk's crime scene. They covered it up real quick. There was no DNA testing either, no fingerprint confirmation. The body was identified solely by Epstein's brother, Mark. And if Epstein were still alive, a public fight over whether he was murdered or committed suicide would be the perfect distraction from the one possibility no one was supposed to consider. How weird is it that Hillary Clinton's brother died a few months before Jeffrey Epstein? And just take a look at what he looked like. Kind of looks like the fake body we saw, huh? Yeah, looks pretty similar, man. Damn. Think about everything that happened immediately after his death. I mean, his supposed death happened sometime in August 2019. And then after that, all of the COVID insanity almost immediately. Bill Gates says a one-world surveillance state is necessary to prevent the next pandemic. Gates says that constant surveillance is the key to staying safe, saying it allows authorities to watch everything and contain a pandemic before it breaks out. The world hasn't come together yet to create that surveillance system. When it does break out, we need to come up with drugs and vaccines. So Bill Gates is now angry, the same guy in the Epstein files, because we don't have a one-world government yet. Okay, we're not accelerating that agenda. Emails Epstein sent himself in 2013 claim Bill Gates caught an STD from Russian girls and begged him for antibiotics to secretly give Melinda Gates. Epstein, you implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD. You request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda and the description of your penis. Absolutely insane. And this is why Steve Bannon, in that leaked interview, says there's something deeply fucked up about you. Jeffrey Epstein's smiling. Well, at least something. Understatement of the century. Gen X Tina says the satanic panic peaked in the late 80s, early 90s. Then in 1992, bam, they launched the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, a nonprofit literally built to discredit anyone talking about SRA or sexual abuse. Coincidence? Nah. They pushed false memory syndrome, a term never ratified by any medical body, making folks doubt the survivors. Pulled in big names from law, science, everything to flip the narrative. It quietly shut down on December 31st, 2019. I wonder how many children got abused and adults this group discredited. Never got the justice they deserved. This is really interesting. Reminder that the False Memory Syndrome Foundation had 2 CIA doctors directly involved in MK-Ultra, among other barbaric programs, on their scientific advisory board within 1 month of opening and 8 days after receiving tax-exempt status by the IRS.
What they would do is the kids would go and play with the children and then tell them that they were either going to go to a party or that there was some toys or whatever and get them so they weren't on the move, and then her father and other members would grab the kids.
Do you find missing children sometimes fall prey to these people?
I believe that they do. We can't prove that they do. But as a law enforcement officer, I question 2 million children missing in the United States, knowing that many of those are not runaways and are so young that they couldn't run away anyway.
Number
Satanic clues. Number 1, coffins. 2, paraphernalia. 3, kidnapping. So ABC's 2020 aired this in the 80s, like it was normal investigative news. Kids used to lure other kids, coffins, cremations to destroy evidence. Then suddenly it was all called satanic panic right after the MK Ultra CIA program was involved. Former Satanists came forward. Victims came forward, too many cases to ignore. Now we're told it never happened. After the recent files, these Epstein files, how can anyone still deny this?
Destroy the belief system within a child, to make a child turn against what they believe in terms of who they are, of who God is, and to desecrate all manner of flesh, all manner of church institution, all manner of sign and symbol that a child could in any way be attached to.
cannibalism. It's difficult to believe, but in every case we examined, children described it.
The hearts were cut out.
Holy shit.
And the children were made to chew pieces of these children's hearts, pieces of their flesh.
Is cannibalism part of the ritual?
The children have spoken about this in almost every instance. Also, human feces, or drinking the urine, or drinking human blood.
Oh my God.
That's part of the ritual.
Right.
I have an old 3-inch scar here on my wrist where my friends used to cut my arm open and bleed my blood into a cup and drink it mixed with wine and urine 4 times a year as a ceremony to Satan.
And finally, cremation. Most of the children describe witnessing it. It might explain why no bodies have been found. So far, police have failed to make the connection, as in the case of yet another youngster who, with his mother's consent, described how bodies were disposed of.
He would take the bodies and put a trash bag over the feet and head. He'd put it, and then what he would do is he had his car parked out back. So they took them to the funeral home, and they were cremated, and nobody ever knew anything about the body.
That is some sick, sick stuff. Now, after watching that, it does sound like things that we did see in these Epstein files. Now, of course, there's millions of files here, and a lot of them, you don't know if they're credible or not. They do sound outrageous, but there are many files that are circulating right now on X and other platforms describing something similar to what we just heard in the child trafficking investigative news segment here on ABC. In one of those documents, now I'm not sure where this is from exactly, it says this. Now, someone is going over what a purported victim said here. And he said while he was on the yacht, he witnessed African-American males having sex with blonde white women, of whom were bleeding during intercourse. He was a victim of a type of ritualistic sacrifice in which his feet were cut with a scimitar but left no scarring. On the yacht, he witnessed babies being dismembered, their intestines removed, and individuals eating the feces from those intestines. He was also raped by George Bush #1. Now, we don't know if this is true or not, but after watching stuff like that and knowing that these things exist, it's not far-fetched to believe that a lot of these demons in charge, like I say, I call them DICs and PICs. That's right, the dick pics. Now it's starting to make sense why I call them that, okay? It's not hard to believe they are involved in some truly twisted satanic ritual sacrifice. In one email here, someone emails Jeffrey Epstein about a dinner in Edmonton for charity, saying, "Hey, Jeffrey, how are you? I'm hosting dinner at a really great restaurant here in Edmonton for charity, and I thought you never know, Bush was just here. Maybe you need to book a good dinner in Alberta to use whenever you want. I know how much you love restaurants." Like, who loves restaurants that much? I mean, it's cool to go to restaurants and eat, but do you know anyone that loves restaurants? Last year, I raised $2,000 for lunch for 2, and this is a dinner for 4. Why are those in capitals? How bizarre. Like, isn't going to a restaurant pretty standard for these people? There's no way they are this excited to go to restaurants. I mean, these are billionaires that have so much money to splurge in all these restaurants. It's probably the only place they eat. They're definitely not cooking at home. They're eating at restaurants all the time. So why are they so excited talking about restaurants? 100% of the proceeds will benefit the United Way, Sign of Hope, Christmas Bureau of Edmonton, and Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation. A special 5-course meal. Would love love to see you bid on it. What? Bid on it? Please feel free to forward this email along to any big bidder types you know who love to eat great food for a good cause. How sick is this stuff? Oh, would you look at that? CBC at the bottom, CBC News Edmonton. You know what CBC stands for, right? Controlled by the cabal. That's right. And you know exactly what this email is about, considering all the Pizzagate twisted stuff going on. It's hilarious that for years people were laughing at you for bringing up Pizzagate, like it's some crazy conspiracy theory that there's no basis in this theory at all, you know? Organized abuse rings, satanic ritual sacrifice, all of it. That was just crazy internet talk, right? And now look where we are, you know, after these Epstein files are released. Now you've got official institutions quietly admitting categories of abuse that sound exactly like what people were told never happens. And that's why I keep saying sooner or later a massive distraction is coming. You can guarantee it, because once people actually slow down and read what's being admitted in hearings and reports, the denial phase collapses. They can't hide behind any excuse at this point. And the Epstein material gives more credibility to the whole Pizzagate scandal, because his emails are full of the same weird pizza language over and over, repeatedly across years, you know, talking about pizza, hot dogs with all of these different people and different emails, acting like it's completely casual to talk about this, buried inside otherwise serious conversations. Slicing pizza, how many slices? Oh, only one slice. Cheese being brought up repeatedly, pizza parties, delivery, head counts. At a certain point, it's like, okay, why does this keep showing up often here? And for those thinking that this is completely baseless, that doesn't happen at all, we have reports of people that suffered extreme sexual abuse and satanic ritual practices in Israel testifying that this happened in front of lawmakers at the Knesset. An official hearing, people, and the testimonies were insane. Women described years of what they say was organized, ritualized sexual abuse as children, group assaults, drugging, sadistic violence, cult-like ceremonies, stuff that sounds so extreme, people would actually normally dismiss it completely because it sounds so absurd. And now there's confirmation that yes, it actually happens. One survivor, Hadar Feldman, testified that from the age of 7 all the way to 21, she was repeatedly sold and raped by groups of men. She described it like it was organized, repeated, and planned, like a system. And the people involved in this were high-ranking government officials. And she said that starting around age 8, her own father brought her once a week into a room inside the Knesset, this is really sick stuff, where she says a sitting member of parliament abused her after giving her drinks that made her lose consciousness every week for a year and a half. Another survivor testified that she was kidnapped repeatedly as a child. She said that they tied her upside down. She said they electrocuted her intimate organs. She said they forced her to watch the murder of small babies. She said they made her dig her own grave, and she told lawmakers straight up, they are here among us. She gave police names, locations, details, everything, but she doesn't believe they took it seriously. A third survivor described being abused throughout childhood by family members, a doctor, a psychiatrist, and rabbis. She described what she called a ritual assault while she was pregnant, and she was forced to do horrific things just to save her unborn child. She literally said they traded her body like property. And what's crazy is the patterns keep repeating across different victims. Multiple perpetrators, drugs, sedation, and total secrecy, satanic ritual framing, psychological conditioning to make these kids feel like this is normal. The same themes over and over. As you could see here in this article on the Times of Israel, it says, I was around 15 tied to a torture bed in basements in the Tel Aviv area, said one woman, recalling an incident in which her abusers, including family members, slaughtered a snake, mixed its blood with hers, and drank it while raping her and calling her a holy vessel. They tied me up in every possible way using whips and electric shocks, raping me, said another survivor, who testified that she was 5 years old when she began suffering unbearable abuse, including by religious leaders and educators who told her that she was defective and needed to be fixed, in quotes. How sick is that? And when lawmakers started asking why this wasn't handled, survivors described investigative failures that sound almost intentional. One woman said she spent over 100 hours giving statements to police, only to later find out the investigator didn't even know the file. Another said she was basically told if even 10% of it becomes word against word, it won't go to court. And here's the part that should really scare you, okay? Israel's own Knesset Research and Information Center admitted there's no legal definition for ritual abuse in Israel, meaning huge gaps in detection, data collection, and prosecution. They basically admitted they don't even have the system to properly track this type of crime. I wonder why. And I wonder why Israel is like the safe haven for all pedophiles. When they get caught, they get to go hide out in Israel. You know, this is starting to make a lot of sense here. That's a pedo capital of the world. So what happens because this is not being properly documented? Well, complaints get buried, cases get treated like isolated incidents, files don't get connected, entire networks like this don't get exposed, victims get ignored, shamed, pressured, or silenced. And that's why when people go back and look at this Epstein stuff, they start noticing the same themes here. Okay, and the assumption that nobody will ever question anything. And if this was all nonsense, it would have faded out on its own, but it didn't fade. It had to be ridiculed. It had to be censored. It had to be suppressed. And every time this stuff starts piling up in the public's mind, something always happens. A shock headline or a big distraction pops up. So because a lot of people are waking up to this Epstein stuff and it's opening a lot of eyes, I do believe a major distraction is coming, okay? In the next month or so, it could be something bigger than 9/11 just to get people's eyes off of this right here, okay? And if that does happen, just remember what people were reading right before it did. When you take a step back and look at the full picture here, it reads like a system where defense, research, biotech, data collection, AI, surveillance, and pandemic planning all overlap through a very small group of well-connected people.
Does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl.
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
Really? Things. You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to, you know...
Whose babies?
There were people who bred babies in our family. No one would know about it. A lot of people were overweight, so you couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not, or they would supposedly go away for a while and then come back.
Anyway, so you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
This is nuts.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Power.
This is absolutely crazy. I'm hoping it's not real. Okay, I'm hoping this is fake. I'm hoping this is completely fabricated just so I can sleep well at night. It's truly some sick, twisted stuff here. Audio clips from the Epstein files add another important data point here, okay? In the recording, Jeffrey Epstein is heard advising Ehud Barak, then Israel's defense minister, on how to turn power and access into money. Epstein tells him to look up Peter Thiel and specifically mentions Palantir. That matters because Palantir sits deep inside government, military, and intelligence infrastructure. Its software connects massive data sets, maps relationships, predicts behavior, and supports decision-making at state level. When Epstein brings Palantir up in this conversation, he's pointing directly at the machinery that converts information into leverage. This places Epstein in the role of someone comfortable advising senior political figures about which private intelligence platforms matter and who controls them. This lets us know why Epstein was protected for so long. I mean, it's because he was connected. Telling Ehud Barak he should link up with Peter Thiel, the reptile, and bringing up Palantir. Yeah, that makes sense. Epstein's value came from his position between political power, intelligence interests, and private surveillance capital. It's really interesting that a lot of people are not bringing up this audio clip here. All the lies they invented about white supremacy were really about Jewish elites. Can you believe that? Systemic oppression, systematic oppression of people. I mean, what does that really let you know, you know? You know how the MSM does it, folks. When Israel becomes the center of attention, They distract the people once again. I mean, the man was undeniably a Mossad agent, okay? Yet the MSM worked in lockstep to convince us Epstein was a Russian agent. How hilarious, considering he literally wore IDF gear and had the whole Talmud behind him. That's right. And, I didn't know how long the Talmud was. It's like 100 books. Endless emails with Epstein sounding exactly like a Luciferian rabbi, referring to us as goyim cattle. I really wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I was like, there's no way they talk about us like that. And, oh, would you look at that? They do. And that our entire purpose in life is to serve the Jewish people. Can you believe that? Which coincidentally happens to be the exact words of some satanic rabbis. That's what they've said word for word. On top of that, Jeffrey Epstein said in an email to Palantir's Peter Thiel, in quotes, "As you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds." Email is also talking about a war right now between Jews and non-Jews, and Jews are winning, end quote. Now, when you take all of these facts and put them together, they point towards the same group of people running the scenes. And we all know who those people are, okay? The Russians, of course. Isn't it interesting, for 1 year straight now, the PICs, that's right, the PICs, have been going full speed ahead with this anti-Semitism crackdown? You don't find that kind of weird? Leading up to this big reveal of millions of Epstein files? Look, most of the files are garbage, okay? That's what people need to understand. AI slop piled on top of each other to discredit the little bits of truth that are actually in the files. There's zero chance that 3 million pages of this stuff exists, okay? That's ridiculous. And they have the nerve to say another 3 million documents are coming. That's pure comedy, okay? There's that 6 million number again. Man, do these people love that number. Yeah, here's 6 million Jewish Epstein documents. Now, just to be clear here, millions of documents doesn't mean everything in here is, true or credible. There's a reason it took them so long to release these files. People wanted the exact Epstein list, of people who went to the island and who were blackmailed. It's very simple. That's it. Remember in early 2025 when all those conservative influencers put on that theater at the White House, holding up those binders? Epstein Files Part 1, making it seem like they had the files. The files were so small you can fit them into a little cute binder. Would you look at that? So how could they go from a few pages in a binder to 6 million? Well, because they clearly used AI to fill up the files with a whole lot of nothing. That's why it took them so long. Now we have many pages that sound outrageous on purpose. People that seem to be schizo, just giving weird accounts that make no sense. That's the point, because now when people read through this stuff, the media gets to point at the dumbest pages and say, see, this is all fake. Look how stupid this sounds. Meanwhile, the real stuff is buried in the middle of it. I mean, even the leaked interview with Steve Bannon seemed a little off, okay? Epstein was asked if he's the devil, and this was his response.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
He has a good mirror. I don't even know if that's real or AI. You don't know anymore, Look, there's definitely a psyop at play here, okay? These Jewish elites are sending emails referring to all of us as goyim cattle and have the nerve to cry about anti-Semitism. Here's Ben Shapiro just a few years ago saying there are no Epstein files, you stupid goyims.
Thousands of hours of tape. There are, by the way, but they are child pornography. The reason the FBI is not releasing them is because those tapes do not include underage people with third parties on Epstein Island. That is not what the tapes are.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay, I also have sources in the federal government who are covering this stuff. And
I'm sure you do, Ben. He also has sources in the federal government. Those little hats are everywhere.
And have seen the documents. Okay, those tapes are just child porn. That's all.
Ben should know.
That's what they are. That's why the FBI is not releasing them. Okay, as far as the Epstein list, what I have been told by my sources is that there is no Epstein list.
Thanks.
And basically, there's a black book of Jeffrey Epstein contacts. And the vast majority of those contacts are already out there publicly. That's why names like Prince Andrew or Alan Dershowitz or some of the names that have been mentioned here. Those contacts, there is no evidence, according to the DOJ and the FBI, and again, that's public. There's no evidence that any of those third parties were having girls trafficked to them. Here is Tucker then asserting that it was actually Mossad. Again, without evidence, not a shock. Of course, this is where Tucker was going. This has become the hot speculation. Is without evidence. You say that Mossad was running Jeffrey Epstein. When I say without evidence, I mean without evidence. Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, said, quote, as a former Israeli prime minister, with the Mossad having reported directly to me I say to you with 100% certainty, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or the Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. This accusation is a lie being peddled by prominent online personalities such as Tucker Carlson, pretending they know things.
Okay, enough. So he didn't work for Mossad according to Mossad. Well, there you have it, people. And it's not just Ben Shapiro that was gaslighting the public, okay? It was a lot of paid-off shills working in these you-know-who-owned mainstream networks. Titles like this one here from an article in 2019. Why are right-wing conspiracies so obsessed with pedophilia? That was their way of shutting down discourse or debate about the matter. Why are you trying so hard to expose a Mossad-led child trafficking network? Why are you so obsessed with child trafficking? You know, for years, they wanted to gaslight people into believing that if you talked about it, you must be obsessed. If you kept asking questions, something was wrong with you. That's how discourse gets shut down without ever addressing the evidence. Does it make sense now why Ben Shapiro was saying all those tapes were child porn? If you want to see more, that means you're sick. You know, it's starting to make sense here. It's gaslighting. Ted Cruz, the same man that said just a few months ago, there is a tangible, dangerous anti-Semitic contingent on the right that is gaining traction, gaining popularity, being listened to by young people, and gaining attention. And now he's screaming this.
Tragically, this pattern keeps on happening. Now, Senator Booker also said we should have bipartisan agreement. I think that's a great idea. We should have bipartisan agreement. How about we all come together and say, let's stop murders? How about we all come together and say, let's stop rape? How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles?
Let's stop attacking pedophiles. I mean, that's one hell of a Freudian slip if I've ever seen one. Remember when I said that if more info comes out about the Epstein files, they'll hit you with the ultimate distraction? Guaranteed fake alien invasion psyop is going to happen soon, okay? And I mean, what are the chances? All this info about Epstein is coming out, and Trump was just seen saying this. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say, we have other things to do. What kind of other things are those? Could it be preparing for Project Bluebeam? Just a few days after these leaks, we see this now. Donald Trump set to reveal UFO secrets in bombshell speech, ready to go. Yeah, perfect timing. And remember, they also said that when this reveal happens, you know, the announcement of aliens, the financial system will crash in a few hours. Their words, not mine, which is actually the perfect distraction possible. Can you believe that? People would immediately stop talking about Israel's worldwide child trafficking operation, you know, Epstein being a Mossad agent, helping to further the Greater Israel Project. No one would care in the slightest if the stock market crashed and the bank runs took place by the millions. Small banks would have to admit they don't have the cash, which would lead to a collapse of every bank out there. You know, first the small banks, then the big ones. Mind you, these are banking analysts saying this. And this is crazy too, because now we know who really owns TikTok. A few weeks ago, the US version of TikTok just came into effect. And since then, censorship is even worse. Okay, if you can believe that. I mean, TikTok is already the worst platform by far when it comes to restriction of free speech. And now people are saying it's a lot worse. They can't even send the word Epstein in private messages. Many are leaving the app altogether because it's just absurd. I think we now know why. There are 5 types of politicians in the United States. Bought by Mossad, blackmailed by Mossad, dual citizen of Mossad, scared to death of Mossad, and number 5, killed by Mossad, okay? This is why the censorship is next level. Reddit, too. People are asking questions like, what does Epstein mean by goyim on Reddit? And, oh, would you look at that? Banned right away. Yeah, we know who the admins are on a lot of these Reddit threads here. Now, here in Canada, we have a few propaganda networks that promote the New World Order agenda every day. Basically, the Canadian version of CNN and MSNBC. A few of those networks include CTV News and Global News. These outlets work together to scare people into getting vaccinated. They shame the unvaccinated people nonstop, you know, push the divide and conquer strategy hard during COVID. They were Trudeau's propaganda arm, plain and simple. They spent years brainwashing people into rolling up their sleeves and taking a toxic injection that we now know is harming millions of people and has killed many people. They didn't question it. They didn't hesitate. They enforced it socially, emotionally, and culturally. Back in 2022, they ran headlines like unvaccinated people increase risk of COVID-19 infection among vaccinated people. Both Global News and CTV News pushed that same garbage at the same time. One of the most brain-dead narratives imaginable, and people swallowed it up without question. You also had propagandists like Rachel Gilmore writing article after article for Global News, telling vaccinated people not to invite their unvaccinated relatives to family gatherings. In 2021, she ran the headline, "Ask family members if they're vaccinated before inviting them to Thanksgiving dinner. Top doctor says." In that article, she quoted Canada's chief public health officer, Dr. Teresa Tran, telling people that if anyone at the gathering wasn't fully vaccinated, then you should be limiting the gatherings to your household members. Families were intentionally torn apart with government-backed media messaging. Then it went even further. Articles floated the idea of denying hospital beds to the unvaccinated. Articles entertained punishing people financially for refusing the shot. In 2022, Global News actually ran this right here. Quebec wants to tax people unvaccinated against COVID-19. Can the province do that? The fact they even treated that idea as debatable tells you everything. Okay, they were conditioning the minds of the people, specifically the vaccinated, to turn on the unvaccinated. These are not journalists here, okay? This is a captured news organization enforcing policy through fear and shame. So why bring this all up now? Well, because after years of public shaming, coercion, bullying, canceling, belittling, and deplatforming anyone who questioned the vaccine narrative, they do the classic 180. Now suddenly Global News is investigating vaccine injuries. Now suddenly they're admitting the government's vaccine injury support program was a disaster. After their own investigation, it came out that over $54 million was spent on the program, and most of that money never reached injured Canadians. The money was taken up by the private company hired to run the program, and that $54 million just so happened to go missing. Yeah, well, ain't that some shit? I mean, remember the $41 billion that went missing from the World Bank Climate Fund? This was money that they taxed from everyone with the promise they would use it to build, windmills, solar panels, and shit. Yeah, you're an idiot for believing that. That money is going straight to the peddlers in charge, okay? That's right, the PICs need to build another Epstein Island. $41 billion. And they can just lose it like a $5 bill. Have you ever lost a $20 bill? I mean, that shit will hurt you for months. I mean, sometimes you feel Jewish about how much you care about that $5 bill. These people can just lose $41 billion here and another $54 million there and go, oops, don't know what happened. Just got lost in the sauce. So $54 million that was supposed to go to the vaccine injured suddenly goes missing. They said the money went to paying staff, managers, consultants, and running the program itself. So oops, no money for you. Office costs, processing claims, and internal reviews. This was their excuse. The money meant for injured people was used to keep the program operating. Meanwhile, the people who were actually hurt were left waiting for years, some still without decisions, some forced to fundraise online just to survive. How does that make any sense? Whether you call it mismanagement or something darker, which we know is the case, the outcome is still the same here. Money meant for injured people was effectively stolen while the victims were ignored. Thousands of claims piled up because the system never planned for this many injuries in the first place, or so they say. And get this, these are just the cases that the indoctrinated doctors admitted were from the vaccine. Do you know what it would take to have one of these doctors actually admit something like that? I mean, the connection would have to be clear as day. So think about all the people that were injured from the vax and were gaslit into believing it's long COVID. Do you know how many people there are out there with a permanent vaccine disability thinking it's long COVID? Now propaganda networks using sinister wording like this, saying long COVID is the greatest mass disabling event in human history. And now even Global News admits many have been injured by a product they helped promote. They coerced people and bullied them into getting these shots. They even helped justify punishment on those who refused to get them. And now the same outlet that helped pressure people into taking the injection is now reporting on how badly the system failed the people who were injured by it. Now when the damage is impossible to hide, they finally admit it. And no one seems to understand the severity of this. Crimes against humanity brushed off like just another news story. People have loved ones harmed and killed, and we're supposed to forget it ever happened? Vindication is finally here. I mean, it's been here. I mean, we were right. Of course we were. But isn't it crazy how endless chaos, one global emergency after another, nonstop insanity around the whole world has made people forget and move on like none of this ever happened? None of this ever mattered? Now they call it a mass disabling event. This is what they were like just a few years ago.
If you are unvaccinated and the virus comes into your community, the virus will hunt you out. The virus hunts down the unvaccinated.
The virus will find the unvaccinated. That's what they all say.
And it's a virus that will find you if you're not vaccinated.
If you're unvaccinated, it will find you.
The virus is literally finding unvaccinated people.
It will find the unvaccinated.
We're seeing COVID-19 tracking down unvaccinated people.
You know, if you're unvaccinated and you're in circulation, you're going to get it.
Well, the Delta variant of COVID-19 has the potential to spread through an unvaccinated community like wildfire.
The Delta variant is so aggressive that if you are unvaccinated, it's going to find you.
Delta is finding the unvaccinated.
The Delta variant will find you. If you're not vaccinated, it will find you.
The virus tends to find places that are undervaccinated.
It does not just move to city centres. It finds the unvaccinated wherever they are.
So you might live in the middle of the desert, but it can still find you.
But if you're unvaccinated, this virus is looking for you.
You know, this virus, this infection will seek out the people who are either unvaccinated or have only had one jab and are not fully protected.
The virus does seem to be finding older people who have not received that third dose.
We'll ultimately find just about everybody.
But these three people, two of them weren't vaccinated, one had just had their first dose. The virus has found them.
Oh my God, how ridiculous is that? Now it's, sorry to those permanently injured by the vax, we lost your compensation money, okay? That's how fast things change on you, okay? The virus will find you if you're unvaccinated and it will hunt you down. Doesn't matter if you're in Antarctica, okay? It'll find you, it'll kill you. And then headlines popped up, the unvaccinated are spreading the virus to the vaccinated people. Like what? I mean, how outrageous. Just a few years ago, that's the level of propaganda we had to deal with. They did all of that just to trick you, to scare you into running and getting a poisonous injection that many people now are permanently disabled from. And know that you don't get a sorry at all. It's, oops, we lost your compensation money. That's how fast things change. What people need to understand is the ones in power, the ones flying their private jets to pedo islands, have spoken publicly for years about depopulation. It's like their religion. They feel they get to decide who lives and dies. It's a serious God complex a lot of these demons have, where they feel the vast majority are just seen as numbers that need to be decimated. They don't see individuals as souls. They see them as cattle, goyim that need to be culled whenever needed. From vaccines, big pharma medication, toxic foods, geoengineering, EMF towers. Depopulation is the name of the game. Take this, for example. Title here says abortion pill reversal has saved over 7,000 babies from abortions. Now, can any of you guess what the anti-abortion pill is? Well, in order to know what it is, you have to know what the abortion pill or pills actually are. Now, this is crazy right here because once you understand how this works, your mind will be blown. For those that didn't know this, because I didn't know, the abortion pill isn't just one pill, it's two drugs taken in sequence. The first one is mifepristone. This drug blocks progesterone. That's its function. It doesn't cause contractions, it doesn't expel anything. It simply blocks progesterone. That's it. Progesterone is the hormone that stabilizes pregnancy. It maintains the uterine lining. It keeps the pregnancy viable. When progesterone is blocked, the pregnancy environment breaks down. That's step one. Step two is misoprostol. That drug causes uterine contractions and expels what has already been destabilized. So the pregnancy doesn't end because of contractions first. It ends because progesterone is removed. That's the mechanism. So when people hear abortion pill reversal and think it's some special counter drug, that's not what it is at all. There is no anti-abortion pill. Progesterone is simply reintroduced to the body. That's it. And the reason that works sometimes is because progesterone is essential. Restore it fast enough and some pregnancies continue. One hormone determines whether life continues or ends right there. That alone should tell you how important progesterone really is. And progesterone isn't just about pregnancy. It regulates mood, sleep, anxiety, inflammation, hormonal balance. It keeps estrogen in check. Low progesterone leads to irregular cycles, fertility problems, anxiety, insomnia, and estrogen dominance. When progesterone is suppressed across large numbers of women, birth rates fall quietly and systemically. Now, when you zoom out, you see hormones do not operate independently. Progesterone production and stability depends on circadian rhythm, stress levels, and endocrine health. Circadian rhythm is regulated by sunlight. Sunlight promotes progesterone by stabilizing the hormonal system it depends on. Sunlight regulates vitamin D. Vitamin D supports endocrine signaling. Sunlight regulates sleep. Sleep regulates cortisol. Cortisol competes with progesterone, and chronic stress lowers progesterone. Poor sleep lowers it as well. Artificial light, indoor living, and circadian disruption all suppress progesterone. So when sunlight is reduced, distorted, or blocked, progesterone production and effectiveness suffer over time across populations, especially in women, and it especially affects fertility. Really think about this. At the same time fertility is collapsing worldwide, the same group of DICs openly talking about how the world is overpopulated are putting in billions of dollars to block the sun. So many billionaires are funding sun-dimming projects and atmospheric particle injection. I mean, it makes sense as to why Bill Gates is funding this now. The depopulation agenda is multifaceted. Make people eat, drink, and even inject them with poison. Make sure they don't have a way to detox either by blocking the use of NAC. They really tried banning that supplement, which helps the production of glutathione, which helps fight a lot of the toxins in our environment. Spending billions on blocking sunlight by spraying down poison that people also breathe. So progesterone is one of the most important hormones when it comes to pregnancy. Not enough sunlight, then progesterone drops. Fertility drops. Pregnancy becomes harder to sustain. Birth rates decline. And voila, you got another layer of depopulation you just added to the conspiracy cake. Okay, this is the future of culling the herd. You don't need to force anything. It doesn't require old school methods of bullets or bombs. You simply engineer conditions that make fertility impossible. You destabilize reproduction biologically. You normalize hormonal dysfunction. Fertility rates drop. Then you point at the collapsing numbers and say, well, it was inevitable. This is why they put out studies saying by 2040, the average sperm count will be 0. The average woman will be infertile without big pharma technocratic help. That's the world we are headed into. Progesterone is the proof. Block it directly and pregnancy ends immediately. A children of men scenario will play out. Is it just a coincidence that at the same time they accelerate this agenda of forced fertility collapse? They're talking about artificial wombs and artificial life in general. Parents of the future getting to pick the exact characteristics and traits of their baby. And now they're talking about alpha genome. Does anyone know what that is? Well, this is where it fits into all of this because alpha genome is an AI designed to analyze massive stretches of human DNA and predict what kind of human comes out before anyone is born. So height, strength, intelligence, disease risk, fertility, development, long-term health, all of it modeled ahead of time on a computer. Once you can do that, reproduction turns into a selection process. Some traits can be encouraged and others can be quietly flagged as problems. In other words, you get to create your own babies by picking and choosing the traits you want. Over time, that reshapes who gets born and who doesn't. And in their roundtable talk for Alpha Genome on YouTube, they even say this. They openly describe DNA as source code and talk about Alpha Genome as a system designed to read it, score it, and predict outcomes before anything happens in real life. They explain how the model compares different genetic variants, ranks them, prioritizes them, and flags which ones are important and which ones aren't. They talk about making this scalable, automated, and accessible through an API so large numbers of variants can be analyzed at once. That means decisions about which genetic traits matter are being promoted. So before birth, before development, before a human even exists. So basically this is predictive policing for our offspring, judging risk, value, and outcome before a person ever takes a breath. Great. Now they want to give our DNA code a social credit score. That's where the idea of junk DNA comes in. So the whole purpose of this AI alpha genome is to get rid of junk DNA in our offspring. DNA that doesn't fit their model, in quotes. DNA that doesn't serve efficiency, productivity, or control. When reproduction runs through systems like this, natural conception starts looking like a liability, and engineered outcomes start looking like the standard. Think about how people will be looked at if they're born through totally natural birth in the future. Will natural births be treated as genetically inferior? People really need to watch more sci-fi, okay? I can't believe how willingly people are walking straight down this path. Remember Gattaca, the movie in 1997? That's a dystopian sci-fi film about Vincent Freeman, a natural, in quotes, human deemed genetically inferior, genetic selection, and where this future is clearly headed. You find out that in Jeffrey Epstein's own emails, he was already discussing designer babies years ago. Epstein was communicating with biohacker and developer Brian Bishop about creating what Bishop described as the first live birth of a human designer baby, and possibly a human clone within 5 years. And Bishop wrote plainly that once we reach the first birth, everything changes and the world will never be the same again, much less the future of the human species, end quote. The language is really interesting here. Like, one of the most disturbing parts is how openly they discuss anonymity. With Epstein writing, sounds like you could be the first investor as long as absolute anonymity is kept, end quote. And explaining why secrecy really matters here, saying we can't publicly identify who these are or their parents or benefactors. It would brand the child as essentially and sadly a freak for life in the media, followed by the financial structure needs to be designed with these details in mind. That makes it clear they understood the social consequences and were focused on shielding the project from exposure rather than questioning the project itself. In other messages, Bishop talks about moving beyond what he called a self-funded garage biology phase, writing, "This gets us out of our self-funded garage biology phase to the first live birth of a human designer baby," and laying out funding needs, lab timelines, and what the next steps will be here. The emails also reference early experimentation and lab work connected to Ukraine. This is really interesting here, mentioned casually as part of an ongoing process. Taken together, these emails read like planning documents. And that's what gets really dark here, because once you see how obsessed they were with secrecy and anonymity, the next question becomes where this kind of work could actually happen without interference. The emails casually reference lab activity tied to Ukraine. You know, the Ukrainian biolabs they were talking about? And they were just talking about it like it was all part of the process. And why is this crazy? Because Ukraine already had a long documented reputation as a gray zone playground where things that would never survive scrutiny elsewhere quietly moved forward. BBC reporting from the mid-2000s described a systemic culture involving stem cell harvesting, missing newborns, maternity wards taking babies from mothers, bodies exhumed from cemeteries, post-mortem footage reviewed, and a wall of silence inside hospitals and institutions. Ukraine was openly described as the stem cell capital of the world years back, and that context puts everything into perspective here. When Epstein's emails talk about designer babies, cloning timelines, and lab work connected to Ukraine, it starts sounding like where they're going to do this at, okay? And why Ukraine is important. Ukraine is well known, this has been for decades, that they had biolabs, bioweapons, organ harvesting, child trafficking, experimental genetics, all the things that need distance from oversight and public exposure. That's why Ukraine is important to them. The infrastructure was already there. The corruption already normalized. The moral guardrails already gone. These emails sound like people plugging into an existing machine so they can push it further, to further their transhumanist bioengineering sick satanic experiment. And it's starting to make a lot of sense why Vladimir Zelensky kept popping up in those emails over and over. Epstein even referred to him as a cokehead. So that lets you know, yes, he's a shill, and they probably pay him in a lot of coke. Also, it's starting to make sense why Zelensky brought in his close friend Marina Abramovic to be involved with schools in Ukraine. He wanted her rebuilding schools for their Build Back Better agenda. I mean, of all people, Marina Abramovic, the one that's deeply connected to the Rothschilds and has been doing satanic art, occult-themed performances like carving a pentagram on her stomach with a razor. Yeah, that's totally just art, you know, nothing to see here, you conspiracy theorist. She's not satanic at all. And she hangs out with people who keep appearing around trafficking and Epstein scandals. This is someone known for shock rituals and spirit-cooking imagery. Why is she being placed anywhere near children in a country already tied to biolabs, you know? And also, get this, Ukraine has the biggest labyrinth of underground tunnels too. And this is in the world, mind you. And yes, she's linked to many exploitation networks. This is starting to get really, really sick here, people. It's all coming together, isn't it? And then right after that, you start seeing why Zelensky's name kept popping up in these Epstein files. Epstein was messaging with former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers about Ukraine. Some of these documents show this. Summers asks him about Ukraine like it's just normal small talk. And Epstein responds saying Zelensky was looking for help. And then Epstein drops this line, quoting Putin, basically dismissing Zelensky by saying he's run by Israelis. Think about how insane that is. This is Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted trafficker, casually acting like a middleman in geopolitical conversations, while a former Treasury Secretary is messaging him about Ukraine like he's some trusted intelligence connector. It doesn't just stop there. The report claims Zelensky is mentioned repeatedly in the files, and that Epstein was in Kiev in early 2019, right before Zelensky got elected. The files also mention Ukraine being discussed with people connected to the Rothschild family, talking about the upheaval and political shifts happening there. And then you get to another exchange where Epstein and Boris Nikolic, once again, the same Nikolic linked to Bill Gates circles, they were discussing going to Russia to meet Ilya Ponomarev, described as someone organizing an uprising against Putin. So now you're looking at Epstein, not just as a pervert billionaire, Mossad agent, but as someone sitting right in the middle of biotech, bioengineering, transhumanism, Ukrainian biolabs, organ harvesting. I mean, how evil does it really get? No wonder he called himself the devil. He's like, well, I got a mirror. That's what I look like. Even regime change talk and intelligence networks galore. And that's why Ukraine kept popping up, you know? It's not just a war zone. It was the demon's playground. A gray zone country where corruption is completely normal, where black budget operations can hide, where labs can run, where Nazi biolabs can run. Remember when they called them Nazi biolabs? This is the place where they can launder money too easily to get any agenda they want complete. This is where they make people disappear too, and where nobody asks questions. So when you see Epstein emails talking about designer babies and lab work tied to Ukraine, and then you see why Zelensky was being discussed in the same circles, you know, it's obviously all in the same agenda, the same department, and the same machine here. Now it's starting to make sense why Zelensky appears in many of these Epstein files as a participant in human trafficking in Ukraine. The author of one of the emails linked him to the modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, who was accused of raping minors and supplying girls to Epstein in 2020. I mean, it gets sicker and sicker, and I know a lot more info is going to come out right as I drop the show, but I'll cover that next week. I'm going to leave it right there, folks. This was a dark one, I know. It was like really sick, and a lot of it I didn't even want to read here. It was really, really sick stuff. But that's where I'm going to leave it, folks. If you like what I do here, it is greatly appreciated if you hit those links in the description. The show is fully funded by the people watching. I got no big name sponsors here, no ads playing. This is fully up to the people if they want to see it continue and grow. So click those links in the description, folks, for ways to support. One-time donations are greatly appreciated. PayPal, I got my e-transfer link in the description. P.O. Box, if you want to send me mail, got the P.O. Box address in the description of this video. Please become a monthly subscriber on Patreon or Subscribestar. You will be the MVP, the most valuable player of the show, because you will be funding the show if you support me on Patreon or Subscribestar. Crypto people, my crypto wallets are in the description if you want to support using crypto. Big shout out to everyone out there that sent a donation. I love all of you, because without your support, the show does not continue. So you have no idea how much it means to me every time I get one of your donations. It really sets a fire off in me and really gives me the motivation to keep doing this. So big shout out to all of you guys. Love all of you. Take care out there until next week. Until next time, people, this is Steve Eyes. You're on the Eyes is Watching channel, signing off.